Today, I'm talking to Michael Carucci of Gibson, Sotheby's International Realty in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the exclusive sales agent for the St. Regis Residences Boston and an ambassador for the Four Seasons private residences at One Dalton. Michael is ranked 25th of all Sotheby's International Realty agents nationally, and he is ranked in the top 9 for the highest volume in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts by the Wall Street Journal's 2018 Real Trends. He was voted Best Luxury Real Estate Agent in Boston by the Boston Common magazine. We talk about how he went from no deals to representing a large luxury condo development and in his first year of business, and how he continues to grow, how to start big and stay big. Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast was created for real estate agents across the country to come together, sharing ideas to take your, their, and our business to the next level. All right, everybody, it's the Jere Metcalf podcast where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today we are excited to have my good friend, Michael Carucci with Sotheby's International Realty in Boston, Massachusetts, doing business in New England. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Good afternoon, Jere.
So everybody, we had Michael on. Michael, he's very much into niching, but it's more about the client than it is about the location. And he has a lot of very high net worth clients and also has a lot of experience representing luxury developments, which we'll get into today. This episode is going to be 100 in the 150s. I think we were going to be 154. We spoke once before. Obviously, we've known each other for a few years, but we had an interview number 38. Oh. And the name of it was something like Managing the Client. And we talked a lot about how you got into business. Give us a quick, I want it in your words, I've been talking long enough, about how you broke into the business, because we're going to do a review of that. And then I'm going to take it, everybody, and really dig into how Michael does business and where he is now and what's going on in Boston. So how did you get into business?
Well, I had a landlord that was a real estate developer that had just purchased his second airplane. And when I was congratulating him, he said, "Why don't you get your license and sell some of my real estate?" So that's sort of how it happened in the early 1980s. And I did it and never looked back.
Wow. So digging a little deeper on that, what were your biggest challenges and your biggest breakthroughs breaking into the industry? Obviously, you had a warm introduction, but how did you really get that traction? Because most people that have that warm introduction and easy access to the business aren't able to live up to the expectations quickly enough to be successful.
Well, I like to say I work hard at being lucky, but my first job I took at a Century 21 office on Newbury Street in Boston. And I think I might have told you this. A couple of months had gone by and I had not sold a single property. And I had my first lead. This is back before the internet. A gentleman coming in from New York. He wanted to spend $500,000, which is a ton of money back then. And he was only here for a weekend. And there was a new development in Boston, 43 unit condo conversion that were 4 or 5 brownstones on Commonwealth Ave. And so I scheduled an appointment to bring the client through on the weekend. It was a brand new development, so all 43 were available. We ended up picking one that we really liked. And I remember speaking to the sales associate in their gorgeous sales offices. And I said, "We'd like to make an offer." And she said, "I'm sorry, but our sales manager, so-and-so, who's not here today," he was golfing.
And they hadn't sold any yet, by the way.
It's Saturday and he's golfing, right? And so she said, "We have a policy that we can't accept offers when the sales manager's not here." Now, I said, "That's ridiculous. This is somebody I could speak to." So the architect developer happened to have her office downstairs. Long story short, she comes upstairs. In less than a half hour, we have a deal. My first transaction. Now,
wow.
ask me any of my history. How long have I been licensed? She asked me to call her the next day. I called her the next day. And again, nothing, how long have you been doing this? What kind of sales volume do you have? She offered me a job on the spot, which I took. Now,
Wow.
I said, I need 2 weeks. I told my broker owner, he fired me on the spot. I called her up. I said, good news is I can start in a week. So I went and I showed up a week later expecting to be directed to the sales manager. The sales associate that I met a week earlier greets me and she says, welcome, Mr. Carucci. Let me show you your office. They fired the sales manager. So now I haven't had a closing. I haven't done a single transaction. I'm now the marketing director of the most expensive development in the Back Bay at the time.
Wow.
With three assistants working under me that had years of experience. To Zena Nemitz, the woman's name was Zena Nemitz. She said, I like the way you close. I like the way you handle people, but never, she just assumed I had all this experience. So I sold that project out in about 9 months.
Wow.
We were 37 out of 43 were gone. And in one Sunday walked 2 women. And remember, there's no internet back then. The only way you could advertise was in the newspapers. And these women had just sold the head of what we call the planning office for urban affairs. It was the real estate arm of the Catholic Church. And they had just sold a big old mansion in the suburbs to the head of the planning office, who said, you guys do condo conversions. We have 2 huge surplus schools in Boston that we want to convert to condos. And of course, they said they did, but they didn't have any experience. So they picked up the Boston Globe. They looked at the biggest ad, which was our ad. And they came in, they said, how would you like to do a couple of schools in Boston? And I said, I'm in. I finished up the project on Commonwealth Ave. And then for the next 3 years, did those schools in Boston's North End. So for my first 4 years was really what we call on-site development.
Yeah.
Where it didn't really do general brokerage. It didn't bounce back and forth.
So any tips to learn something that quickly? I mean, how did you figure it out? So it sounds like a lot of common sense.
If you don't know something, ask somebody. Surround yourself with good people. One of the first things I did with the planning office for urban affairs is I took 2 of the people that were with me on the Back Bay restorations project, because we were just about done. 37 out of 43, you're pretty much done. So, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I took some of the people with me that were very successful in what they were doing, and they came over with us. And we did well.
Wow. That's incredible. So, and when you did that, did you do it under, I mean, I don't know if, well, some people may be wondering, did you do it under the umbrella of that broker, or did you handle the broker situation?
The original development was done under the developer's name, Back Bay Restorations. And then the 2 women that came in had a very well-known real estate company in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is one of Boston's toniest suburbs. So we officially opened up a Boston office. One of the things I asked, though, is I said, yes, I'd accept the job, but I want to be a partner. I want X percentage of the company. And I got it. And so they officially opened up a Boston office, and we did those surplus schools under the name of their company.
Wow. So you did that, and then where did you ever become an owner before you transitioned to Sotheby's, or what happened?
So after those schools were done, I opened up my own agency on Newbury Street, and I operated it for about 25 years. And at one time, I bought a Remax franchise, did not renew that contract. At one time, I bought an ERA franchise. I did not renew that contract. And then I had always been in discussions with Sotheby's, the owner broker of Sotheby's, Larry Rideout, great guy. And I knew him because he used to sell franchise sales for Realty. Larry sold me my ERA franchise. So we went way back. He happened to have been from Woburn, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston. And we like to say it was a 5-year conversation that took 30 minutes to do. And it was just, I thought that I had taken the boutique company far enough. I didn't lose a lot of transactions, but when I did lose them, again, on the ultra high net worth, I lost them because the client wanted a brand. They wanted somebody with a global presence, which Larry could deliver to me. And then the more we talked, the more I saw it as a better fit. And then the rest is history. So we did that deal about 4 years ago.
So that was what, 2016?
Yeah, 15, middle 15. So it's
2015.
And
so then you came to Sotheby's International.
We never looked back. Yeah.
Wow. So over that period, basically your first 4 years were on-site new development, but you were running the show, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then you went into being more of a traditional agent, it sounds like.
Yeah. What sort of, it was, the landscape changed, back then as an owner broker, I had no issue referring a lot of my business to my agents because back then the most you'd spend on the split would be 50%. And so for me to say to somebody, hey, take so-and-so out, when I'm getting half of the compensation, that was more than enough for me to keep everybody fed. And then, the model, whether it was Remax or Keller Williams or it became, our business became instead of an agency-driven industry, it became an agent-driven industry. Mm-hmm. You had to start paying, your rank and file agents, for no better word.
I think Remax probably changed that.
Remax did change it, yeah.
Yeah.
The 95 split, right?
Yeah.
And so then you either had to compete to pay your bills, and so it sort of cut the mid-level agent out. You had to either be very small or very large. And so sometime around late 90s, I just started managing transactions instead of people. And it was probably the best move I did personally. I'm better suited at it. And it worked for me.
Right. You mean you're better with the people than the transaction?
Better with the people in the transaction versus
I see. Exactly. You better. Yeah, I get it.
Atlanta, whether you're in Boston, whether you're in New York, the point of entry to be a real estate professional, there is no point of entry. You want to be a real estate professional, get your license and hang a sign and you're a real estate professional. But as we know, that's not the case. And so you want to differentiate yourself. There's 27,000 agents in my, and on average, you like to hear the 80-20 rule.
Oh yeah.
Of us do 80%.
It's like a 95-90. I'm still on your spot. Yeah. In our business, it really is. But in Atlanta, there's
90% of the business.
There's over 20,000 in Atlanta, and when we do deals, we know one another because there's not that.
We all know what everybody else is doing, and competition is inevitable. And so there are certain competitors you're a competitor, but you embrace them, and if they're good and they're ethical, then you're proud to call yourself a real estate professional. But I don't miss managing real estate agents at all.
Wow. So you kind of went into managing agents, and then you backed back out of managing agents, and now you're doing deals, and you've got a small team.
At my height, I had 100 agents working for me with 5 offices, and I don't miss that. Yeah.
So tell me, before we go back into your career, because I think there are a lot of agents, we get a lot of agents listening to the show that are just, I want to take my business to the next level, and in a way of being a professional, not a way, and most of our agents are in the luxury, but the other agents I think are like, okay, I'm at a level where I could go into ownership, I could go into running a big team, starting my own thing. So for those which are many of us listening, what are the pros and cons of managing agents and running a big company and being an agent, doing big deals and making big money? I kind of threw the big money in that, but anyway.
You have so much more control of the process, and your quality of life, in my opinion, improves dramatically as well. I think there are some people, like the owner brokers of my office, we've got maybe 400 agents, and they're great at what they do. They're patient. I'm not patient. They do a lot of hand holding. It was frustrating to me where you would, you'd have an agent with you for years and all of a sudden they'll go out and they'll do a decent deal and then come to you and say, hey, want to raise, you know,
Yeah.
and you see it all the time. So
Yeah.
I like the aspects of the business where there's a transaction involved and not a personality involved, and managing the transaction with whether it's the buy side or whether it's the sell side. I'm more suited to that, and especially at the level that we transact business usually with the 10% of the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that when you're dealing with that caliber, when they're that successful, they're probably smarter than you are. And so listen more, listen to what their needs are, deliver value, deliver service. And, there's a couple of components. One, you hope that they like you, you hope that they respect you, you hope that they know you. And then if you can just show to them that you're knowledgeable, there's no reason for them to look somewhere else.
I think the key is I'd say this too much, but it's true. There's a common belief or paradigm in our business in general that it's about, follow up, follow up, follow up. Not that that's not true, but the more important thing that really I find is a common denominator of agents is the value is, especially when you get into luxury real estate, upper tier, the top 1% or the top 10% of the top 1% is they're looking for someone that they can trust. Like you said, someone that can hear them and they'll listen to them, and someone that knows what nobody else does.
And
someone who's the resource and access to
tell
them.
somebody not to do something, and it's not in your best interest. When someone's looking at something and you have a huge fee and you say, don't do this, and this is why I don't think you should do this. You've got a customer for life, because they're looking at you saying, wait, this is a lifetime relationship. This is not transaction based.
Exactly.
I've got a client now, I can't mention their name, but they just sold one of their companies for a little under $3 billion. And they earmarked $100 million just to spend in very high-end luxury real estate for me to go out and farm it. And we've located a handful of transactions in the last couple of months. But there were a couple they were looking at. They were ready to go, ready to sign the contracts. And I'm saying, I wouldn't do this, guys. And this is why. What are they, when you do that, your credibility just enhanced itself like 10x.
Mm-hmm. Well, that, and when you know the business well enough, I think a lot of it is knowing when to do that, because if you make the call and it's wrong, either way it's costly.
Yeah. Well, I think a really good agents need to understand when to push, when to pull, and when to do nothing at all. And it's all timing related.
Know when to push, when to pull, and when to do nothing at all.
And just don't do anything. Just wait it out, because you just don't know.
Yeah, really, really good advice. So we talked about, before we started recording, we talked about, it's funny because in the beginning of our conversation, when we weren't recording, you said, I really focus on the client, not a geographical area, but you also said it's very important to niche or niche and know what your niche is. And obviously you have one. Elaborate on that a little bit for our listeners and what you mean by that, and what it is for you, and how you figured out what your value is versus what somebody else's is, and maybe some examples in your career of other agents.
Where I'm a little bit different. You've heard the adage, real estate is local. And I think that is true to a certain extent, but technology has changed the availability of information, whether, and it's in front of you. And I'll give you an example. Last year, I sold the most expensive home in Cambridge, not in Boston. I sold the third most expensive home in Lexington, the third most expensive home in Winchester. These are suburbs of Boston. Now, are there agents in Lexington and Winchester that technically know the town better than I do? Perhaps. But it's so easy to gather sales data, figures, neighborhoods, so you can effectively be a quick study and become an expert in those towns.
Mm-hmm.
We follow where our clients want us. Right now, I have
Mhm.
a handful of multi-million-dollar homes in Boston. I've got one of the most expensive estates an hour north of Boston on the ocean. I have an estate in Martha's Vineyard. So why do they hire us versus somebody geographically local to them? I think because sellers have realized that the buyers of these properties are probably not currently living there. They're
Mhm.
probably relocating. And usually when somebody's relocating, they come into the hub. So we get them
Exactly.
temporarily first, and then what we do with them. And it's true. I can tell you that of the transactions I just mentioned, I think 3 of them I did direct, where we sourced the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't the
Exactly.
buyers. Right?
And you would say, so to sum it up, what would you say? What is your niche? What do you specialize in? We already know the answer, but
Ultra high net worth clientele, whether it's the list side or the buy side, where they're coming,
mm-hmm.
and it's not, they're not first time buyers. I've got mortgage brokers that constantly complain to me, how come I'm not sending them any business? And I'm not sending them any business because there's very few mortgages involved in what I do. And when they
Exactly.
are, these people have existing banking relationships.
Exactly. Really great point. So here's a good question. Everybody, it seems to be kind of a common theme that everybody wants, or maybe not everybody, but it's popular for agents to want to be that luxury agent or want to be the agent representing the high net worth or ultra high net worth buyer. But not everybody does it. And I will say before I let you answer the question, I know a lot of people who know a lot of people, but those aren't always the people who end up being successful at representing the high net worth client or successful as real estate agents. So I do this a lot. I'm combining two questions is how do you know, how did you hone in your specialty? And what is your advice to someone on whether they should consider even tapping into representing a high net worth client or not? What are the pros and cons? That's a loaded question, but start where you want.
Well, first is somebody has to do it. Somebody has to represent them. And why not you? So you've got to go in with that attitude. Somebody has to do this. Why not me? And then you need to understand how highly successful, educated people think and work. And they've got to like you. They've got to trust you. You cannot bullshit them. And you've got to become an
Okay,
authority.
say that again. Would you?
You cannot bullshit them.
You cannot bullshit the high net worth client, especially the ultra high net worth
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
You just
They
can't. I mean, that
didn't
is
get
like
to where they
so
are by
important.
being stupid.
What's that?
They didn't get to where they are by being stupid.
Exactly. But keep going. You were on a path, but I had to
And
get that out again.
um, I, I think where I'll give you an analogy. I told you last year I was the number one Sotheby's agent in New England. $130 million, but maybe 40 transactions.
And top 25. So 130 million, 40 transactions, and the top 25 in the
Yeah.
top 25 of Sotheby's International
But the
Realty.
point is, the gentleman behind me, a great broker, did like $80 million, 300 transactions. Now,
That's a
whose
big
business is
difference
more?
between 1 and 2, by the way. Big difference.
Right, but 300 transactions versus 40 transactions. Now,
Mm-hmm.
300 inspections. That's 300 to 600 attorneys, 300 closings. If he does his job well, now he has 300 clients that are going to refer him business. Some would say that his business is more valuable
Mm-hmm.
than my business. Last year I transacted, round numbers say it's 40. But though, remember, that's a much smaller circle. That type of wealth is controlled. There's more likelihood that those people know each other than the 300 people know each other. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Then what happens is your business starts snowballing. And, we, St. Regis, we're bringing that to Boston. That didn't just happen. The St. Regis people looked at what we were doing for the Four Seasons.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Everybody does, I know that, but our listeners don't. So you brought the Four Seasons to Boston.
Well, Cronin Development is a great developer is building what is going to be the first St. Regis residence without a hotel component. It's 114 units.
And that's what you're bringing to Boston and the St. Regis in the next 2 years.
Right. And this is interesting because this is really where new development's going. And I'll give you two examples. What Cronin is doing is he has a 2-member on-site development sales team, and they're two of the best in the business. And they hired Gibson Sotheby's, myself, to be the outside branding firm. So the developer has his own sales office that controls the sales. We're the outside brokerage that brings the business in. And that's where you're going to see a lot of development being done that way. And to give you an example, we just finished One Dalton, which is the second Four Seasons in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
They listed a company, Campion & Company, Tracy Campion, number 4 agent in the country last year, but phenomenal agent. But again, the model is the same, where Campion & Company was the official listing agent, and the Four Seasons had their own in-house sales office. So what they're doing is the developers are controlling the sales process and using branded real estate companies to sort of funnel the traffic in. And that's what you see happening.
Wow. Interesting, because usually when a developer has an inside sales team, that's just what they do.
I think you're going to see more and more of this concept because it's the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you, because the builder gets to maintain their control that they're used to and that they want to control with their inside sales, but how did you come into this opportunity? How do you, give us a little bit of insight into how that works.
I think
you can share.
One of the things One Dalton did, which is the new Four Seasons, is, again, they had their in-house team and then Campion & Company, but they also did something different, and they named a handful of sales ambassadors, which I was one of them, where they gave us a little more access, a little more compensation. And that was hugely successful. I believe I sold more buyers in that building than anybody last year. And word gets out. And so the St. Regis folks said, well, wait a minute. We know the Sotheby's brand and the St. Regis brand are a great fit together. Why don't we align ourselves with somebody that's very active in the branded full service development, which I was extremely active in that. So they got an agent that's his core competence. They got a brand that's synonymous with luxury, going into a brand that's synonymous with hotel and luxury residences. So it was the perfect fit.
Wow. So here's something I want to just say about you, Michael. Like, I love it because so many people come into being a real estate agent and they're wondering how they're going to just get a listing and how to get somebody to hire them. And I always say this, but you definitely have it, is you're not waiting to be hired. You make things happen and you make deals happen. And as you make deals happen, you keep your eyes open to bigger and better opportunities than just picking up a listing or earning a buyer and just doing a deal. Where and how did this mindset of yours come about? And how do you, not to get super woo-y cheesy, but you literally like manifest this stuff. What do you think that is that what is it that makes you different? How, we know what makes you different, but how do you do it?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think you have to be optimistic by nature. I think it has to be the glass half full. You cannot, to be in this business and to be successful in this business, you can't be that glass is half empty. And you need to balance confidence. There's a big difference between arrogance and confidence. And you've got to know, if you don't know something, know somebody that knows it. First of all, know your limitations. The best thing to tell somebody is, I don't know, but give me 24 hours and I'll give you the answer, instead of pretending that you do know. You got to walk into the room expecting the contractor, expecting to whatever the job is to get that accomplished. But that's not enough. I mean, that has to be your mindset. But you also have to prepare for it. You have to walk in and do the things that you're supposed to get done. and become an authority on that. It's not easy, and it's not for everyone. And the longer you do it and the more you do it, if you become successful at it, then your confidence builds. And again, you got to be very careful not to get your ego in the way. Stay humble.
So I'm going to rephrase that. That was good stuff. So how do you do it, everybody? We're talking about how does Michael come into this business, but everybody, when you say, oh, I'm a real estate agent, it's kind of like yawn. I know 100 other people. Every person almost knows as many real estate agents as they do people. And you're making not just deals happen, but really big deals happen with the ultra high net worth client or uber high net worth client. And we're talking from like day one, really. And it was 4 categories. If you really break it down, number 1, you got to have the right mindset, be positive, have confidence, not arrogance, know the difference, know your limitations, and know how to fill the gaps and keep learning. Number 2, which it kind of leads into it, but prepare and deliver, do the work. Number 3, have the knowledge, be the authority, which combines again with the mindset, prepare and deliver. And then the other thing, number 4, was it builds over time, just getting that compound effect over time. But we might even call this number 5 is whatever you do, watch your ego, stay humble. And that leads back to staying gracious, knowing the difference, going back to your mindset and knowing the difference between confidence and arrogance. I'm going to write a little circle chart for everybody on that.
There you go.
Like, anyway, but I mean, that just, I had to rephrase that because that was really well put. Mindset, prepare and deliver, be the authority, and continue to build it over time without ego. Watch your ego.
And stay consistent also. You know, when you see results, remember what got you there. And also don't be afraid to look at what other people are doing in your industry. To me, to sort of compare an apple to an apple, I look and see what so-and-so is doing in LA, what so-and-so is doing in San Francisco or in New York. I'm talking about high density urban areas for my business in Boston. And, you know, I don't necessarily call it plagiarism. I think imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And,
exactly.
And, you know, you talk to these people, what's working, what's not working. And, you know, the day you get up and you think you know it all, that's the first day of the rest of your life. And it's never.
That's where it all goes downhill.
Yeah.
When you see results, remember what got you there. That's what you just said. That's like quote. Everybody, you're going to see that on social media by Michael Carucci. Yeah. When you see your results, remember what got you there. And that could be good or bad.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. So I want to start closing us out because I know you've got big things to do today, especially with the St. Regis coming to Boston. Oh, before I do my final 3, we want to hit a little bit on the Boston market because you were just telling me before we were recording, the Boston market is now the most expensive real estate by square foot. New York City, I think you said, is at an average of $11.30 a square foot, and Boston is at $11.60. Is that? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little
bit
about
on in Boston, and for those of us in the industry, we're saying what took so long. We're the most European city in the country. We have the most economic diversity, hospitals, schools, biotech, sports teams, or maybe not this year.
Don't talk to me about that. Actually, I'm supposed to care. I'm Southern. I'm from Atlanta. I went to University of Georgia, but I can't be offended.
If you look at Boston, what it represents, and it's a small, big town. And for us, it's become global. I told you I was very active in the new Four Seasons, which we just started closing in the last few months. And I can't tell you the number of buyers there that have homes all over the world. So instead of them picking London or Paris, they're now picking Boston as their 3rd or 4th home.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That explains a lot. That's incredible. And that makes sense. Boston is the new Europe. People are buying their 3rd and 4th homes there as opposed to even Paris, or it's comparable to Paris and other places like that to have a 3rd home in or 2nd home in even. So final 3. Number 1, what have you found is the most beneficial, whether it's a tool, a mindset, anything? What do you think is like the one thing that is your biggest tool to your success that you couldn't do without, other than your phone to connect with people?
You know, it's interesting because if I was not in sales, I probably would give you a different answer. But I would have to say technology and social media. The idea that you can reach so many people with relative ease now. And so then what's critical is the messaging.
Mm.
For you to be able to hit a button, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and reach so many people effortlessly, I think that's an extreme competitive edge.
Well, and you just said what's important is the messaging. I think that's powerful because I stress this a lot to my team is that when you push that button,
You can't take it back.
yeah, you get it. You're getting in front of a lot of people, which is a great advantage, but it can be a great disadvantage. So I'm going to add on to that question. What do you think is the most important thing in your messaging, or the biggest advice you could share for messaging?
Well, I think there's
That kind of power.
consistency would certainly be one of them. Brand consistency, being on point. Consistency, knowing, having somebody look at a post and say, hey, that looks familiar.
Branding.
Yeah, branding.
Yeah,
And
or that's
also,
what I think of.
and
Yeah.
also give it a human twist too as well. It doesn't always have to be real estate related. We're just starting a campaign, and we're just calling it This is Boston. And it has nothing to do with real estate. It talks about the four seasons of Boston: summer, winter, fall, spring. It talks about all of our wonderful hospitals. It talks about all of our wonderful schools, the biotech centers, our hedge funds. Um, people don't realize the owner of two of the biggest soccer teams in the world are from Boston, Roma and Italy and England. And
Wow.
so it's getting the message out. I like to, we have this quarrel with the woman that runs our social media, and she's doing a fantastic job, but I like to counter it and say, well, we've given you some great content to write about, and Boston's given you some great content to write about.
Yeah.
So I think
Exactly. Putting together a video like that, who comes up with the content? Did she come up with the content? Do you have a marketing person do that? Because then that's a whole nother layer.
two people. One
And
of
you
them.
probably have a lot of insight to share on that one.
Pardon?
You probably have a lot to share and put in.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, it's all behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah,
And it takes some time to put those videos together, but they do a great job.
that's incredible. All right, second question. If there is a book in episode 38, over 100 episodes ago, I don't remember if you shared a book, but if there's a book lately or over your lifetime that you would most recommend to us for our life and or career, what would it be?
Oh, there's so many good books out there. The one guy from Fort Collins, Larry Ninja Selling is probably.
I've been hearing about that for a few years now, and it's getting really big, and I keep meaning to check it out.
Really resonated with me because, and he spoke at Market Leaders. He happens to live in the same town.
What's it? Ninja Selling?
Larry Kendall, I think it is.
I should know his name.
It's Ninja Selling. So Ninja Selling, Larry Kendall, phenomenal book.
Awesome. Larry Kendall, Ninja Selling. What's your biggest takeaway?
Don't try to be all things to all people.
Oh, good advice. I could use that. Don't try to be all things to all people. And last question. If there's one thing that we remember and take away from this interview, if we're just going to forget everything else, what's that one thing need to be?
You don't get a second chance at a first impression. I guess when you go in and you meet people, make sure that you do it right.
You've built a career on that. Awesome. Thank you for an awesome interview.
You're the best. Let's stay in touch, okay?